Hello, Harry.
Hi, Karen. Good to talk to you at last.
Oh, good to talk to you. Finally, it's not easy to schedule the time with you.
Well, we're both busy.
You're in high demand.
Sometimes.
Harry, would you tell our viewers a little bit about your background?
So, quick background: grew up in New Jersey and went to MIT. Got a bachelor's and master's in engineering. Worked for a series of companies: GE, a Danish foundry equipment company, U.S. machine tool companies, all kinds. Eventually got an MBA at the University of Chicago. And my longest job was as the president and then chairman and chairman emeritus of Charmy, which became Agi Charmy, so a Swiss machine tool company. So I ran the North American operation for that company. And it was 25 years, and it was as good a job as anybody could hope to have. And I was delighted.
Wow. Harry, what made you start the Reshoring Initiative?
There's a number of reasons. One is the history of my family. We've been in manufacturing for generations. My grandfather worked at Singer Sewing Machine in Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is right across the river from New York City. And the building there at one time was the largest building in the world. And they worked there, and then I worked there in the summers. And that building dominated sewing machine manufacture for the world. And I drove past a few years back, and the building was gone. Singer Sewing Machine was gone, and we had lost. My family tradition there was gone. New Jersey lost that. The country lost that. As so many other people in the country have lost similar companies around the U.S. So I said this is not acceptable. And as I was phasing out of Agi Charmy, that was an opportunity for me to do this. And so I worked for the good of U.S. or North American manufacturing, just like you do.
Yeah. So you started basically for very personal reasons.
Personal reason. Another reason, for about 20 years before I did this, I was also the spokesman for a skilled workforce. I did a lot of studies on why it made sense for students to go into the skilled trades, become a tool and die maker, the precision machinist, really the skilled professions. And so I'd promised thousands of students and their parents and their guidance counselors that it made sense to become a tool and die maker instead of being a doctor or a lawyer or a salesman or a Wall Street person. And then all those jobs started to go away. So I had to redeem my promise by bringing the jobs back.
That's great. As we know, the main reason why companies move abroad seems to be the high labor rates. And at the moment, we cannot...
In the U.S.
In the U.S.
Yeah.
So, and at the moment, we cannot compete with countries such as India and China. Do you think this was the main reason, and are there any other reasons?
Certainly, the motivation that drove the companies, the U.S. companies, Canadian companies, to Mexico, Asia, was the lower labor rates, the lower prices there. They saw other companies, their competitors perhaps, going abroad for those low prices. They in many cases, they followed their competitors. They followed other companies. It was like a herd movement. Everybody saw everybody else doing it, so everybody did it. And sometimes the CEO would have a bad quarter, and he'd announce to Wall Street that we're going to go abroad. We're going to take a third of the work offshore because that's the way we're going to get the margin back. And indeed, they probably got a lower price, but often their overhead went up. So they went because the labor was lower, because the price was lower. But in most cases, maybe 60% or more, they did not make an objective, detailed analysis of what the total cost was. So therefore, many of them went who should not have gone because the total cost, what we call total cost of ownership, is actually higher when you make it there and ship it back in some cases than if you make it here. And even some of those who were right to do it 10 years ago, now the Chinese labor rates have gone up, the Chinese currency has gone up, the oil costs have gone up, the customers of the company require quicker delivery, better response time, and therefore even some of the decisions that were right 10 years ago are wrong today. Okay. So yes, they went believing that low price was going to be the solution, but some of them were wrong then, and increasingly they are wrong today. Specifically, Boston Consulting Group, big consulting company, has released a study in the last few weeks, so say in early October, saying that by 2015, most products would be more economically made in the southeastern U.S. and Texas rather than made in China and shipped to the U.S.
Wow.
Okay, so and that wouldn't have been true at all in 2000. We've been only a small percentage of the work would that have made sense. Now by 2010, more of it would make sense to bring back, and by 2015, even more would. So they went abroad for the low prices and wages. Some of them made a mistake, and so what we do is get them to use this total cost of ownership so they make objective decisions and come back.
What is it then that you exactly do to help companies who are not sure what direction to go?
If a company comes to me and they're willing to reevaluate, they're willing to either decide whether to keep it here or whether to bring it back, then I will train them on the methodologies of the total cost of ownership. Okay. And so we provide a free total cost of ownership estimator, a free software, which is on the website at www.reshorenow.org. And they can go there and they can use it for free. There's absolutely no charge. And everyone who's used it has told me it's very objective. The customer puts in data about a part or a tool. How much does it weigh? What's the price in the U.S. and China? How many are you going to buy? And then they have to answer some questions about how much intellectual property risk there is, how much quality differential there might be between the U.S. or Canadian versus, say, the Chinese or Indian or some sort. So they answer a series of questions, and then it comes up with this total cost of ownership for as many countries as they want, and then hopefully they make a more informed, more objective decision. The only thing we ask of them is that when they do that, they tell us about it. They said, Harry, we used it, and either we don't like it because, that's okay, or we used it and we decided to bring back 3 jobs, $500,000 worth of work, so then I can take them as a reference and take that on to other companies.
Did you develop this software?
Yeah. It was started as Excel, and it used to be people could download it, but then I'd never get any feedback. They just used it, and So now they use it online, and so they have to log in so I can contact them, and also we anonymously retain the data, so we can, for example, do trends. In the automotive industry, the Chinese price as a percentage of the U.S. price is changing like this, you see, so we can then maybe forecast by what year Chinese automotive product total cost of ownership will get to the U.S. And we have these 29 different costs, so as more people use it, we'll be able to see where they think the cost distribution is throughout all these categories, and then that can help other people make good decisions.
That's great. How big is your team, or are you doing this mainly alone?
You're looking at the team.
and you go out and you speak about it. That's how you communicate it. Manufacturing is cool.
So I'll speak at about 100 conferences this year around the U.S. Have not been invited to Canada, but if you hear of any opportunities, I would come. And And the idea is to speak to the big companies so that they decide to change their sourcing decisions, and to speak to the smaller companies, the suppliers, job shop, contract manufacturers, and to convince those smaller companies to use the tools to sell to the big companies. So if I were selling to Karen, if you were the purchasing agent, I'd say, Karen, I'd like to make these for you. And you might say, Harry, I'd love to buy from you, but you'd have to match the Chinese price. Yeah, and I'd say, Karen, do you mean the price from China, or do you mean your total cost of ownership from China? Which is it? And hopefully you'd say, well, what's total cost of ownership? And I'd explain it to you and say, here's a software, here's a webinar we could look at together and see Harry describing it, training on it, and then we'd both know about it. And you might find out my price is already going to save you lots of money.
So do you feel that many people are still not aware about that? The difference between the total cost of ownership and the savings in labor cost?
Most companies, survey says, maybe 60% of the companies make their decisions just on price or only on maybe landed costs like price, duty, freight, packaging, something simple like that, and therefore they miss 20 to 30% of the total cost. So they're making a decision based on a cost of 10 when the real cost is 12 or 13. And if you use wrong data going in, you get wrong answers coming out. So on the other hand, surveys also say that about 60%, about the same number, of the companies want to start using total cost of ownership, that they know they should. So there's an unmet need and a recognized need by the companies that we are starting to meet.
Wow. What piece of advice would you give manufacturing companies and the general public if you would have one piece of advice for each of them?
Okay, I'll try to keep it to one. For the companies that offshore or might offshore, very simple: use total cost of ownership. Decide based on total cost of ownership. Recognize all of these different costs and make a better decision in the interest of your own company. Not for Canada, not for Karen, not for Harry, not for the U.S., but because your company will be more successful if you do that. Okay, that's for the companies. The smaller companies use the tool to convince the big companies. For the average citizen, I'd say understand that the manufacturing companies are working to bring the work back, and that there are very good careers in manufacturing. So if your son or daughter is trying to decide, should I become a precision machinist, or should I go work on Wall Street or Toronto, or whatever that is in Canada, say a lot of value, good pay, entrepreneurial opportunities, a lot of use of computers, able to make something real instead of trading on a computer and everything sort of theoretical. So that there's a great career there for people. Because if we bring the work back and there's nobody here to make it, then there's no success. So we need more people and a increasingly higher quality, smarter, more dedicated people to be competitive.
For sure, and it's very important to increase the awareness.
Yeah.
Harry, thank you so much for your time today. I truly appreciate this, knowing what busy man you are.
Yeah, it is always a pleasure to be contacted by someone who shares the enthusiasm.
Thank you so much, Harry. Have a great afternoon.
Okay, thanks, Karen.
Bye-bye.
So, bye-bye.